25 after the hour. How about a moment of Zen? This is how the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration showed they were back in business this morning. Look at this. It's beautiful. The imagery of the sun rising and then heading west across our country from the stunning GOES HD satellite. The caption, "We are back up and running this morning. Thank you for your patience." Well, in fact, hundreds of thousands of federal workers returned to work today now that the federal government is back open after the president ended the stalemate with no money for his wall and no promise for wall money. Temporary reopening is only good till February 15. In an interview with the Wall Street Journal, Trump said he wouldn't rule out another shutdown, calling it certainly an option, and that, quote, he doesn't believe congressional negotiators will strike a deal over border wall funding that he could accept, and vowed that he would build a wall anyway using emergency powers if need be. Trump also lashed out at conservative commentator Ann Coulter, who called him a wimp for caving on the wall, and he got back at her by calling her hostile. That earned him a rebuke from a host on one of his favorite cable news programs, his go-to, Fox and Friends.
I think the president cares way too much about people in the media. He's president. He's not a candidate. He's got to make some tough decisions, and he's not an absolute monarch. There are times when you have leverage. There are times you don't.
Hope he wasn't watching Bill Maher Friday night, because Ann Coulter continued on Bill Maher. Kilmeade's comments come a day after Trump criticized two Fox News anchors by name on Twitter. Never thought I'd say this, but I think John Roberts and Gillian Turner at Fox News have even less understanding of the wall negotiations than the folks at fake news, CNN, and NBC. In the meantime, the State of the Union is back on the calendar. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi invited Trump to address the nation from the House floor on February 5. Trump has accepted. With us to talk about all of it, and it's a lot, Michael Steele, former chairman of the Republican National Committee, former lieutenant governor of Maryland, and Peter Nicholas, who is important tonight because he is the White House reporter for the Wall Street Journal, and he was the last journalist to speak to this president by phone. Mr. Steele, home field advantage counts. You're here. I'll ask you this. What was it all about? The shutdown probably cost the American economy $11 billion. Rough math. Right. That's about twice the money the president was asking for
right.
in the meantime.
Yeah.
And if you've lost Fox News.
Well, there are two things. You hit on 2 points. One is the idea that this was such an emergency. We had to spend these resources, but it cost us more to do nothing. And the president never calculated that, because he thought for sure that everyone would just fall right into his lap, or he would be able to bully them into a position. Nancy Pelosi became the wall he didn't anticipate. The second piece, when you look at Fox, that's a matter of exasperation. What you heard from Brian Kilmeade was exasperation, because there's only so much and so much time left in the hours of the day to defend, explain, or ignore what this president says or does. And I think you've seen now more and more of the folks over at Fox getting to the point where it's just not good business. And it does impact credibility after a while. You start to lose audience. And those things are sort of that point. Again, the president didn't calculate. He can't control it. And so that's why you see the tweets that you see.
So, Peter, I know it was a telephone interview, but I'll ask you nonetheless, because there are still atmospherics to this kind of thing, and you've spoken with him before. How did you find him? And this threat to shut it down again, maybe use emergency powers, was that crocodile in nature, or did his voice sound real?
Well, I found him, first of all, very willing to talk and in no hurry at all to get off the phone. I mean, he seemed happy to discuss these things. He said he was taken aback by images of some of the hardship that furloughed workers were enduring. And he said he did not want to see people suffer any more than they already were, which is one reason why he wanted to bring an end to the shutdown. Another reason, he said, was it was just futile. He was making the point that Democrats, he said, are under the control of radicals, and therefore negotiations were fruitless. And so he was going to put his hopes in this bipartisan committee that's now meeting, although he was not at all optimistic about that. He was saying that there's less than a 50-50 chance that they would produce anything that he could accept.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.